Okay, so welcome everyone to our monthly Murmuration that will be focused on Master Naturalists, how to engage volunteers from those programs as well as other programs. We're very fortunate that we have David Gwin with us today. David is actually a contractor on the Time to Restore project. He's been working with us at the NPN since last April. And David has just a wealth of experience to share about engaging Master Naturalists. He's been working on projects across the state of Texas for Time to Restore and trying to engage observers. So we're really lucky to have him and his expertise with us today. So welcome, David.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for joining us as well. If there's any particular questions you have or topics, we'll save a little bit of time at the end to get to those, but we are going to be devoting the majority of our call today to talking about the Master Naturalists. So I guess to start off with, David, you have actually been a master naturalist yourself for about 20 years. And just can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in being a naturalist?
Sure. Well, first, let me apologize for my delay. I have gremlins in my desktop right now, so I had to jump on the MacBook to get here. So, apologize for that little hiccup. It is, I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but luckily I have a backup computer, so here I am.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. So apologize for the tardiness.
No worries.
Don't usually let that happen. It just something's going on with my computer right now. Um,
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, how I became a naturalist. From a very early age, I have had a extraordinary interest in the natural world. And I'll just be real honest with you. It started with birds. It then moved to insects. It was all about butterflies for many years, and all of the plants that all of those organisms regularly interact with. And try to make a long story very short. When I got of an age to go to college, I went off to college and matriculated as a botany major. The problem is I did not come from a relatively affluent family, and so college was mine to buy. And anybody that knows what trying to get a degree in life sciences is like, you generally have a lecture in the morning and you have a lab in the afternoon. And if you are an individual who has to pay to put themselves through college, that can be very difficult to do. And so I had to give up my pursuit of a life sciences degree in the interest of trying to get a degree, just so that I could make a living. Always with the thought in my mind, at some point I was going to come back to what had been a big part of my life my whole life. And so um, I ended up migrating to social sciences and ended up having a very wonderful experience with the degree. Got a bachelor's and got a master's and went off and became a economic development professional managing the economies for municipalities in six different cities here in Texas. Was wonderful. But about halfway through that, I thought, you know what? I've made it as a professional. I want to go back to that nature side of me that was so important in what I thought I would do. And that's how I came to be a master naturalist, because it gave me the opportunity to pursue something where my heart was really in it. And it gave me an opportunity to serve the communities on a much different type of environment than I had been before. And so that's how I came to be a master naturalist. That's how I've kind of met the need that I originally had, even though I didn't get to pursue it as a college student or a vocation professionally. I will share with you one last point, Aaron. It was very interesting as a master naturalist, because you have this, this very undying passion for the natural environment. And so you can imagine, as a professional, when I was heavily involved in developing economies for municipalities, communities in Texas, often I would be sitting across the table from a developer that was really suspicious of me because they knew I was the president of the local Audubon Society, but I also wore the hat for the municipality as the lead negotiator for a development deal. And that made them very unnervous. So I'll share that with you because it was kind of interesting. I often had a very awkward conversation in the beginning to help them understand where I was coming from. So sorry for
That
that
was
long intro, but it
no,
does kind of
that was
make
really
sense when you
interesting.
get to know me.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm so glad you were able to pursue that passion you had for
Yeah,
nature in a different way. Sometimes it's nice to keep it as a hobby. If you have something that's your job, sometimes it can get tiresome in
yeah,
some ways. So
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
great that you're able to maintain
it
that.
it's now my full-time job.
Yep.
I was able to retire after 30 very successful years working, like I said, for 6 different cities. And now I pursue my passion, which is nature and community engagement and protecting and celebrating everything that the natural and world environment can provide.
So can you tell us a little bit more about what it means to be a master naturalist and what that kind of
Yeah,
certification
yeah.
program is all about? Because I think some people probably aren't too familiar with what it means to actually be like a certified master naturalist.
Yeah. So Master Naturalists, I know that we're from all over the country here on this call. Master Naturalist is a individual that has a particular interest in the natural environment, but also comes to the effort with a volunteer spirit. Okay. And so most states in our country have a program that lets people step up who have a particular interest in the natural environment and connect. Some of them are called conservation corps, or there's any number of names. More often than not, these days, master naturalist is kind of the way that the label gets fixed. And in exchange for 40 hours of training that is provided by usually professionals in biological fields or wildlife conservation fields, you agree to continue to give back to the community through volunteer service and advanced training opportunities. So, Master Naturalists go through a 40-hour training curriculum when they matriculate. I went through it in 2005. And then every year thereafter, I have had to put in a minimum of 40 hours of volunteer service for approved activities and gain at least 8 hours of advanced training to further my path in as a master naturalist. And so that's where this volunteer service uh, credential and aspect can become really valuable for people who are working on volunteer type reliant projects. And it's a kind of a niche out there that if you have a project and you're working on something to try to build enthusiasm and service around, it's a great resource to tap into. Just so you know, master naturalists are not alone. Many states, in fact, even more number of states have master gardener associations that do a very similar thing, but have a slightly different focus in terms of what they're focused on.
Yeah, and shout out to Rita and Steve because they are master gardeners
Yeah,
with Pima County here in Tucson.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and can you say anything about you mentioned Master Gardeners and we've talked about Master Naturalists. The Native Plant Society of
yeah,
Texas is
yeah,
another kind of organization. And can you say anything about their kind of
yeah.
service and things like that?
Yeah, the beauty. So the beauty of being a master naturalist is there's a lot of overlap. So many of my master naturalist friends are also master gardeners. Many of them are also NIPSOT members, and NIPSOT is here in Texas. It's the Native Plant Society of Texas. We call it NIPSOT. Most states in the country have their own native plant societies that are organized around the geographic boundaries of the state. And like I said, there's lots of overlap. So many of them will also be master naturalists. They don't have to be, but they can be. But the difference with master gardeners and master naturalists is there's this service element, this part where you give back. And that's kind of that niche that you kind of want to be aware of as you're looking at your own programs.
Yes, very useful for trying to find observers is
Yeah,
tapping into
yeah,
those programs that already have that service requirement and they can
yeah,
fulfill some of that or maybe even all of it through a Nature Notebook program.
yeah, very much so. And in fact, here in Texas, as we've rolled out, Aaron mentioned that I am blessed to be the coordinator for Texas for the Time to Restore project. It was very quickly, with very limited resources, very quickly an avenue that we have used and somewhat exploited to be able to rally interested individuals around a project that really relies heavily on citizen or community, if you will, efforts to collect data to support a particular project's goals.
Yeah. And Michelle, thank you for putting the link to the Ann Ross. I was actually going to talk about that
Yeah.
later today, but yeah, we have a great link in the chat there to try to find if your state has a affiliated Master Naturalist program. Often Master Naturalist programs I think are affiliated with like cooperative extension at universities, but
Hmm.
they don't have to be. So that's a great
Yeah.
resource
Yeah.
in the chat there for finding out if your state does have one, and then who
Yeah.
the contact information is as well. Thank you,
Yeah,
Michelle.
in much of the South, y'all, I'll just share with you. I'm not sure where everybody's geographically from, but in much of the South, it's a county function. So generally, the state does a deal with the county, and the county provides a bit of the funding, and the state provides a bit of funding to make the programs operate. And then they're all volunteer driven. Here in Texas, we have a unique collaborative type partnership that also includes our Parks and Wildlife Department. So Parks and Wildlife, because they're so reliant on volunteers, have a say in the process of how the program gets rolled out at the county level.
Yeah, and can you tell us just generally about how many different Master Naturalist chapters are in Texas and
Yep.
about how many
Yep.
people are part of those?
So I'm absolutely. So I mentioned that Texas has a Master Natural program, and it's been in operation since actually the late '90s. So we've had it. I came about 5 years in, so we're getting very close to our 30th anniversary with the program. Um, but anybody that knows Texas is a very large state, 254 counties. And I mentioned that this is a county based organization, but 254 counties. We have 50 chapters in the state, so not every county is covered. But all of the urban areas, most of the population centers are covered by at least one Master Naturalist chapter. To give you an example, I live in Houston, so we have a Master Naturalist chapter here that's just for Harris County. Now that covers almost 4 million people. Houston is the fourth largest city in the US, so it's largely urban. And so it impacts the program. The county program for Master Naturalists here is very different than it would be in, say, a very rural county. But many counties out in West Texas that have very low population centers, they will cover 10, 15, 20 counties for one program. But in urban areas, it tends to be just on the county level.
Yeah, and you have yourself been a part of four different chapters in Texas, right? And in a lot of
Yeah,
different parts of Texas. So can you
yeah.
speak to any of those other kind of differences that you've noticed between them in terms of either like the training that you receive or the service requirements?
Yes. Yeah. So the beauty of the program is that because it's at the county level, it gets a real unique flavor as to the composition of the county. So if the county is heavily urban, it really dictates kind of how the program gets set up and what's important or a priority for that program. As I progressed through my career while I was working for those Texas municipalities, while I was still very much doing the professional career path, I was able to move around the state, and luckily, each time I moved, I was able to join that new chapter and become an active volunteer under their program. And the interesting thing is it gave me an opportunity to be a very active member of two very urban counties, Dallas and Houston. But it also gave me an opportunity to be part of two very rural counties, which is Brazos County, which is Bryan College Station, which is a relatively rural part of the state with a very major university in the county. And then also I was in New Braunfels, which is also fairly rural between Austin and San Antonio. And the beauty of every time I've been a part of one of those chapters, I've been welcomed in and found lots of things to do and become a part of. But the character and the personality of each of those chapters has been vastly different. It's really driven by the type of county that the Master Naturalist program has been set up for and the composition of the members who make that project and program happen. For instance, many of the rural areas are largely driven by retirees. So many of the members are retirees. And they have a very different, they come to the program very differently than somebody who's of working age or when I was in Brazos County, many of our master naturalists were college students. Well, that's something that most chapters don't have as a luxury, to have young, energetic people that are ready to go out there and change the world. So we set up projects and programs that took advantage of that youthful, bravery and desire to make a difference. And really, it really imprinted on the projects and programs that we set up and delivered. So it's been real interesting. Each chapter's been different. And as I've slipped into this time to restore role, I've used that even more to kind of understand and dig into some of the other chapters that I wasn't a part of, to learn a bit about what makes them tick so that we can use it for our efforts under Time to Restore.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that. So just to kind of give everyone a little bit of an overview on the Time to Restore project, so you know what we're talking about, and I'll put the link to our landing page in the chat. This is one of we have many different, projects that we kind of focus on doing phenology in a particular part of the country. Some of these are our Nature's Notebook campaigns. The Time to Restore project is actually funded through the Climate Adaptation Science Center in the South Central region, which includes New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. And we started this project back in 2021. And the inspiration for the project was really some of our partners who were wondering what's going to happen to pollinators in the future under climate change. And can we kind of be thinking about the kinds of plants that we're putting out for pollinators, and wondering, is the timing of the flowering going to be shifting under future warming? Can we kind of make any sort of predictions about that? And then can we have more in-depth information about when the seeds are on those plants too, for the purpose of like harvesting those seeds for restoration efforts? So we have a bunch of different partners across that region. And we've really been trying to collect more data, because we realize that, there are all these great pollinator plants, but we don't really know what's happening with the phenology even right now. So when are these plants flowering? When is the start of flowering? When's the peak? When's the end? And the same thing with the seed timing. And so David has been responsible for the Texas part of the project and trying to get people excited about doing Nature's Notebook there and collecting data. And so this is where kind of the Master Naturalist comes into that. But can you speak, David, to kind of why you went after Master Naturalists in the role that you have there, trying to like recruit new Nature's Notebook observers, and how you went about that?
Yeah, so and I'll just tell a bit on myself. One of the things I learned as a economic development professional as I was working through my career before I retired is the smartest person never tries to reinvent the wheel, right? So you really focus on what your resources are and what all of the data is telling you should be doing. And so, because I came out of the Master Naturalist world, I knew that model very well. It became very, very clear to me that with limited resources, we needed to focus what we were going to be doing, particularly in terms of outreach, on the lowest hanging fruit in terms of who might be interested and willing to assist us in these data collection efforts. And so Master Naturalists, Master Gardeners came immediately to the forefront. I also I came out of a collaboration with the Native Plant Society of Texas, which has about 4,000 members across the state. I should also tell you the Texas Master Naturalist Program has 15,000 members in its core. So there are a lot of people that have gone through this training in the nearly 30 years that it's been out there. Now, many of them have passed because they were retirees when they came to it, but we still have a pretty strong core of about 10,000 individuals that really roll up their sleeves whenever they're called to action. And the exciting part to Aaron's question here was that I believed, after I studied Time to Restore and what the goals of the project were, I believed that I could make a compelling story to Master Naturalists and Master Gardeners as to how they could be part of us working on pollinator restoration, informing pollinator restoration, if you will, in a meaningful way, particularly in the face of climate change. Everybody here, particularly Master Naturalists, but also Master Gardeners, know our climate is changing. If for whatever reason, it's changing. And if we don't know what the data tells us about that change, we're going to get caught in a very difficult predicament. And Master Naturalists and Master Gardeners have both rallied around the importance of being part of that. I will be honest with you, I can get a little passionate about what I do, I can typically share that. And so it's created a real rallying, a sense of urgency and a rallying around this effort. And I think it's really helped us to try to tell the story and build an army on the ground to begin to work in at least the most populated parts of our state.
Yeah, so can we get into a little bit more of the specifics about like how did you actually go about trying to like contact all of these different groups? So you have this
Yeah,
like potential pool of,
yeah,
10,000 or more
yeah,
master
yeah,
naturalists. Maybe and someone who's in a different state won't have quite that population, but
yeah,
how would you
yeah,
recommend they kind of go about like,
yeah.
approaching and trying to get people interested?
So the easiest, the path of least resistance, or the easiest way to kind of wrap your arms around what we're trying to do here is to find individuals that probably share a very similar outlook on how projects should be valued and how projects should be termed important. And so the projects that I focused on, or the individuals that I focused on, were those who were first working on projects very similar to Time to Restore. And so that meant I needed to build relationships and bridges with individuals in any number of chapters, not just the ones I came out of, but those around me that had really focused on community science as a priority, and then also wildscaping. Wildscaping is something I share a passion for as a master naturalist. So I started reaching out to coordinators for these chapters that were heavily involved in wildscaping efforts, either as a manager of native gardens or in the training programs around them, so that we could start to build some relationships with people who I knew already kind of got it, and would probably be very willing to help us out when I imparted this sense of urgency. And that's what we've done. So I started so if you think of, I mentioned I came out of two very urban counties and two very rural counties. I went back to my my networks in those counties and started to build out. So once I had quote unquote conquered those audiences, we then went to the chapters around them because they had contacts, and so on and so forth. And that's where we really built some steam. Right now, I'm very happy. Aaron, you don't even know this yet. We're now at almost 65 counties in the state of Texas of the 254. Time to Restore has been approved for volunteer service. So that means any master naturalist or master gardener that would like to participate in this project collecting data can earn their service time in those 61 counties. And all of those counties are heavily populated. So that really makes a difference in terms of being able to say we've got critical mass and we're rolling and moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really important step, right? Is that approval process. And I
Yep,
don't know for sure if that's like a part of every single Master Naturalist program in different
yep,
states, but I think often from what I've heard, there has to be some sort of an approval process for it to be a
yep,
kind of like
yep,
an official way to get those service hours. And the service hours can also differ pretty widely between states. I think Gina in Louisiana said theirs is maybe 30 hours or maybe even
yep,
20. So it
yep,
can be fewer,
yep,
but it can be as high as maybe 60, I think, in
yep,
for us in Pima County, I think is that high. So
yep,
with that approval process, do you have any recommendations there on like the
yep.
easiest way to try to make that happen?
Yeah, yeah. So, and I'll just go ahead and tell on myself. One of the things I wasn't aware of is that process is not uniform across the chapters. And so, all of the chapters, there's 50 Master Naturalist chapters in Texas. Every one of them have their own approval process. I didn't know that going into this, and I have had to learn that the hard way. And as we started back in April through this process, I've had to go in and study those that were the biggest chapters and learn their approval process for myself, so that I then knew how to divide and conquer. And so, what you will want to do is go to the groups that you believe will be most open to helping, and then understand what it takes to go through their process. You don't want to subvert their process. That could be very dangerous. You want to understand the process, and you want to then connect the dots for them so that they understand how your project fits within where their goals and objectives for their program. And once you do that, the process gets really easy. It's even easier if you can build a couple of allies within that organization. So I spent early on, I have now a little black book that has all kinds of key contacts sprinkled all over the state that help me make the skids slide a little easier when we hit a snare in another part of the state as we roll this project out.
Yeah, and generally, how long would you say it took from that kind of like initial contact and maybe if you had an ally already until you were able to get that approved?
Well, luckily, we were able, because I was retired, I was able to spend a lot more time than I probably should have been in the beginning. So I was working in parallel. So don't try to conquer all the chapters that are going to be hard work first. Try to go after the chapters which appear to be a little easier, and then have a parallel path for one that you think is going to be a little more difficult. That way, when you have a bit of win on one side, you don't get discouraged when you hit a lot of resistance on the other. And I'll tell you, the resistance we encountered with Time to Restore and many of the chapters that we did have some resistance with wasn't because of the project. In fact, it had nothing to do with the project. It had to do with the personalities and how they felt like they were being invited into the process. So once we got past that, it got a lot easier for just about everybody. So it does pay a lot of dividend for you to understand the dynamics of the organization you're going in to approach, and understand that before you put anything on the table. Because if you start dumping stuff on the table and you get crossways with somebody, or they get their feelings hurt, or they feel like they're being left out, it won't be easy, and that can be a real problem. It's community engagement 101, really, in terms of kind of understanding as an outsider what you're asking for, and then how to help them become the leaders in the effort that you're hopefully bringing forward with them.
That's great advice. So I'm just thinking about, someone who's in one of our other states and kind of the process that they might undertake to try to get this going. So refer back to that link that's in the chat that Michelle put for the Ann Ross platform. And I'll just share my screen really quick to show you. So if someone, this is for Alabama, I think, which is the first one on the list. If someone, they don't have that ally yet, they don't really have contacts, what would you recommend? Like, there's an email here for this contact,
Yeah.
Wesley Anderson. Like, what kind of email would you send if you didn't know this person at all? Like, would you try to go into a lot of depth about what you were trying to do? Would you propose like, hey, you should, add this on as an approved job? Or would you offer like an info session first? What would be your kind of tactic to get this going?
Okay, so I'll share another hard lesson learned in this, and I actually learned this long before I came to do this role. One of the best ways to move forward with a particular project, something that you feel is important, is to get to know them on a personal level. And so I will tell you that email is not a very personal way to break the ice. So, telling on myself and revealing some trade secrets here, I actually started going out and dropping in on the meetings. Even if I went there virtually, I went there with my face and they got to see me, and I shared why I was there, that I just wanted to learn a bit more about their group and who was, involved and what was important to them. And then the ones that were close to home, I dropped in on their native gardens on their work days. I dropped in and said, hey, guys, tell me about this native garden. What's it been like to make this project happen? And then that opened the door for me to have a conversation about, we've got another project that, guess what? It's focused on native gardens and native plants that occur in those gardens. And the natural synergy started to happen. All of a sudden, I had an ally in that organization now. And it wasn't a long time investment for me. It just I had to do a lot of homework on the front end, I'll be real honest to you. But once I had perfected the model works over and over again with slight tweaks. It really does. But you need to make a personal connection with somebody that's of like mind and understands kind of what is important to you, and what's important to your project. And once you've got that ally, they can help you avoid a lot of pitfalls. They can help you start to understand exactly where to go and how to start knocking on doors to be able to move your project and your goals and objectives forward.
That's
Did
great
that help,
advice.
Aaron? Okay.
Yeah. So maybe in the case where all you have is that email and a name, you just
Yeah.
reach out and say like, "Hey, I'm interested in learning more about this.
Yeah.
Can I come sit
Yeah.
in on your meeting, or do you have any events
Yeah.
coming up that I could go to?" Just start building
So
that relationship.
yeah, Aaron, let me give you a real example. That was our reality when we kicked off Time to Restore. There were many parts of the state because Texas is so big. There, even though I've lived here most of my life now, there are parts of the state that I have still not seen. And so to try to be as inclusive as possible, we needed to be in areas that, quite frankly, were very insular to much of what was happening in many of the more populated areas. And so I just started doing, Google is your friend. You can learn a lot through Google about what's going on in more insular type areas. And so I started to learn what their projects were. I started to learn where they were spending money. Where were they putting their limited resources as a volunteer organization into projects? And then when I started to see, wait a minute, they're investing in projects that we can then tap into to collect data, it's like, okay, now I need to invest some personal time, some individual one-on-one time to get to know the group and see if we can build some bridges. And I'll share with you right now, we have yet to to fail to build a bridge. Every one of them, when we've done that little bit of homework on the back end, has really paid off in terms of being able to open doors for training opportunities, for identifying interested individuals that want to be part of the project.
That's amazing. So can you say anything about, I've kind of witnessed this I've seen emails go by, but kind of like what you're getting yourself into with Master Naturalist a little bit, because,
Yeah,
you can get to
yeah,
the point where it is approved and you got the interest, but what happens after that in your
yeah.
experience?
Yeah. So master naturalists are passionate people, right? They because they have this service requirement, they come to this. Many of them come to it as a retiree. Master gardeners are the same way. They come to it with a passion, and you need to appreciate that passion. So many of them have filled a professional void with now a new volunteer drive. And so you need to be patient with that because lots of times they need to kind of get all of that out of the air and out in the open before you can kind of get to your project and what's important to what you need to make happen. So just be patient with that and let them know you're not there just with a hat in hand. You're there to build an effort. I used with Time to Restore, I used the argument of how pressing climate change is for us as a planet, not as a chapter, not as a state, not as a county, as a planet. And that really resonates with people who are can do people. And volunteers tend to be can do people. They want to make a difference. And you have to help them understand how your project, your effort can help them realize that need. And once you do that, it will change the world for you in terms of what they want to do and how you will then feel this sense of engagement. I've got volunteers now. In fact, we've got one on this call. Hi, Tina. That have in their part of our great state have stepped up and said, you know what, I think I can lead a little bit more in my local area to move this project forward because it works for me. And that's the kind of thing that has made a difference for Time to Restore Texas, is that we are trying to build bridges on the local level and letting everyone know how they plug into a much bigger project and a much bigger need with the efforts that they spend doing this activity.
Yeah, and I think you said something a couple weeks ago in one of our check-ins about just how well the fit it seemed like it was for Nature's
Yeah,
Notebook and Master
yeah,
Naturalist. Can
yeah,
you relay any of that to this group here and just like
yeah,
how it seemed to really they got it, like clicked with
yeah,
them?
yeah. So one of the beauties, and this is me revealing, some of the discoveries that we found out very early on. Nature's Notebook, despite all its quirks, and I assume here, Aaron, everybody knows Nature's Notebook on here, right?
I
So
think mostly, yeah.
despite all its quirks, it does let people who are data driven really have fun, right? You get to go as far as you want. You don't have to go any further than that front screen. and you're adding to the bottom line in terms of data collection. That can make a real difference. And that's me stepping into my flower bed and impacting this project. And once you kind of frame it up for them and let them see kind of how that is done, it really changes the world. I can't tell you how excited I am for Nature's Notebook 2.0 because I think we will change the world with the what we know now about how Nature's Notebook currently fails us. We'll change the world with a new tool. And it just opens up the possibilities for so much more that we can do.
Yeah, and if anyone doesn't know what that means, Nature's Notebook 2.0, David's referring to our
Yeah.
new app that is under development right now. I'm sure you guys have seen us talk about it in newsletters, but we're really excited about it because I think it'll be so much easier for people to use, especially people
Yeah.
that have never used Nature's Notebook before. They're just getting into it for the first time. It'll have more of an entry, where there's different levels where you can participate and kind of ease into it a little bit more. There'll be a lot more educational and kind of tutorial resources. And then we'll also offer some features for local phenology programs, like being able to do one-time reports or having like a QR code next to one of your trees where you can have someone who's just a casual visitor enter a data point. So really exciting stuff. And it should be out in spring 2026. So just about a year away, but we're working hard on it.
Hopefully I didn't reveal anything I shouldn't have said
No,
there. And
no,
I
no.
just,
We've been
I
talking
know that
about
I've
it.
used that to kind of dangle in front of people that are frustrated right now with the current Nature's Notebook to let them
Yeah.
know help is on the way. So, please help us all keep everybody as patient as possible as we work through getting that tool in place.
Yes, yeah, and we have had some technological issues. I think just people feeling like it's kind of overwhelming to try to figure out the system, or when you first see the data sheet and there's so many questions on it. So we're trying to deal with that in different ways. David and I are actually doing a training for Time to Restore tomorrow evening, where we're going to go through step by step, how do you set up a site, and then how do you add a plant for people who are maybe a little less tech savvy or just haven't been able to figure it out on their own, and actually walk through how to do that on the website and then how to do it on the app as well. And we'll also offer that same training during Phenology Week. So another plug for Phenology Week. I'll put the link for that again in the chat, but we'll have another one of those trainings on that Monday. Let's see, I think the other thing I wanted to ask you about was just if there's anything else related to like the Master Gardeners or the Native Plant Society of Texas, like any tips on engaging with those groups or anything that might be different than Master Naturalists in your experience?
Yeah, yeah. So one of the big ones, y'all, is focus on the group within those organizations that is probably most open to hearing your pitch. Okay. So for instance, when you head to the master, if you're working on some, native organism study or project and you need people to be open to the whole idea of collecting data on native plants, when you head to the master gardeners, try to find that native plant section in the organization. Or when you go to the Native Plant Society, try to find that group that deals with the training or the outreach so that you can start to figure out who's the movers and shakers, who have been able to realize results in terms of making their plea to the stakeholders that respond to them, so that you can minimize the amount of effort that you're investing that won't potentially bear as much fruit as you need. Here, as Aaron can tell you, the resources here for outreach are extremely limited. They're about to get even more limited. And so that means every time we take action, we need to produce a return on that. We can't be doing this if it doesn't produce some type of return on the investment. And so you want to do that. And Master Naturalists and Master Gardeners make that easy because they have a service requirement. But the other organizations can be brought to the table too, because many of them became involved in those groups and organizations because they care about what you're working on. They care about what you're doing. And so you just need to be able to get in front of that group that's most sympathetic to your project and its goals, and then start to have conversations that build bridges with them.
That's great advice. And maybe my last question for you is, you are in Texas, which is a very red state, and you have a lot of people that may not believe in climate change there. So what has
Yeah.
been your kind of tactic there in trying to still get people to be interested in a project that is related to climate change?
Yeah. So I'll just share that. I'll tell on myself here too. Regardless of how you view climate change and what has caused it, you need to be really careful about how you present overall kind of assumptions. Okay. Yes, I'm in a very red state here in the southern part of our great country. But the reality is there's lots of variation in terms of what people believe is behind climate change, or if climate change is even actually a long-term realization for us. And so I have to be very careful about how I put that on the table. And so I usually start out talking about local experience. As we've done the trainings and I've done the outreach conversations, I don't go in and say climate change is a fact. What I go in and says, tell me what it was like in winter 20 years ago. And it has yet to fail me that they haven't told me about a different weather pattern than what happens now. Okay. So that's all we needed to establish to then be able to have a conversation about how something is happening. Okay. And everyone that's reasonable, once they understand that you're trying to collect data to understand what's happening and support decision making in the future, it doesn't matter what your politics are. This now is something that you want to be part of because you want to, people want to solve problems. That's what people want to do. It demonstrates progress and it makes you feel worthwhile. And so avoid the politics, y'all, because it will only give you a headache. It'll only give you a headache and it won't get you anywhere. And in fact, it could get you isolated. So have conversations that really mean and matter, by avoiding those things that are probably going to be very controversial and harmful. Okay.
Yeah, I like the idea of linking it to people's personal experiences and
Yep.
starting out
Yep.
with like, what have you
Yep.
experienced yourself? And then also I think a lot of people love pollinators, despite your
Yep.
politics. So
Yep.
they care
Yep.
about them and they understand like even if they don't believe that climate change is human cause or that it's long term,
Yep.
like they could see that there's
Yep.
impacts now.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's really great advice.
It
And
really
I
makes a big difference.
Yeah. And I see that Tina has responded to a question in the chat. Thank you so much, Tina, for taking on that. That's a great response about what Time to Restore is all about. So thank you.
Thank you. I got it.
Yeah, you got it. You're an advocate now for the project. Thank you.
Yes. Tina's was an early adopter up in North Texas. And
Yeah,
so she's been an ally in the North Texas region for me, particularly on the west side of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So,
that's awesome.
just want to celebrate all that you've been able to do and deliver in your part of our great state.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Yay. So any other questions anyone has for David? Does
Yeah, I'd
anyone
love to hear
feel
your
like
questions, y'all. It'd be great. Pick my brain. Anytime someone asks me a question, it always gives me a way to think about maybe how I could do things better. So please do it, particularly if you're from another state outside Texas, or particularly if you're from a different part of the country that's not in the South. I'd love to have a conversation. So please ask me questions.
Yeah,
Well,
has
I don't.
anyone in our
Yeah.
other states worked with Master Naturalists so far?
I was actually just writing in the chat, but I thought, well, I'll just pop on. Thank you, David. This is super helpful. Though I have worked, so I work at the Wells Reserve and we have master gardeners that do a lot of ongoing projects already here. And two of them are also within our phenology project.
Very good.
And just hearing you talk about like different ways to get in touch, I'm thinking about going to, they have some meetings and some gatherings. They also gather regularly at the garden out here, which I
Yep.
could just pop down and talk to people in person. That is not a revolutionary idea, but yet I've never done it. So thank you.
Yep.
You just
Mm-hmm.
need your mind spurred a
Yep.
little. But
Yep.
also, I don't know if you mentioned it, you may have, but I just realized that the one here, they have their own internal listserv. And
Yes.
so I'm just going to ask one of them, I would, instead of going through all these other channels, I'm just going to ask one of them if they're able to post a blurb that I've provided on that listserv. So then it's
Yes.
coming internally instead of me trying to like reach out from this other email address that people don't recognize. So
yeah, so let me tell a little bit about Aaron and I and kind of how we're using that model. So Aaron, for a couple of years, and Aaron, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, for a couple of years has been doing an outreach effort to Master Naturalists through the state, what we call a virtual volunteer fair. And what that does is it allows you to make your plea or your pitch to capture volunteers. One of the things that we have learned over the past year is that it really helps to have a local making that request. If it looks like it's coming from the outside, it is very, particularly in our part of the country, particularly in the South, it can come with a lot of suspicion. And so you tend to want to favor activities for those people you know. It's just like your regular relationships. So Karen, absolutely. You try to find your best insiders. I also think you also should try to find a cheerleader. Find a cheerleader, that someone that you've engaged with, one of your master gardeners maybe, that has an ability maybe to impart some passion about the project. Because if you can get just a little bit of passion imparted to another volunteer, it'll light like fire. It'll go like fire, and next thing you'll know, you'll have too many volunteers, and you'll be having to schedule them to work your project. What a problem to have, right? So good luck with your efforts, and thank you for sharing.
thank you. And I have to run. Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
You bet. You bet.
Thanks for doing it. Yeah, Sarah, did you have a question too? Oh, you're unmuted. Or anyone else?
Tina, how about, so you have been on the receiving end. Is there any insight or help? I don't want to put you on the spot, but it might help the group to hear from the receiving end. So you were actually on the receiving end when I first started to try to build bridges. Maybe you could provide some insight on what that was like, and maybe how we might have hopefully gotten better. You know, I think it might be good for the group. Aaron, if you don't mind, we do that.
Oh, perfect.
Now, one thing that I think wasn't mentioned was the power of, you know, the Texas Master Naturalists. It's a group of 3 or 4 people. And once I think David got them on board, or you may have been involved, Aaron, got them on board, and they sent out the information. That's how I learned about it. But it was after I was hooked after one thing on the, and so that's why I decided to take the leadership course and really. So I've written articles in our newsletter. I've met with the National Plant Society of Texas, which I'm also a member of, and just, you know, but I think I agree. You got to somebody excited and who wants to champion it locally, who knows people. So yeah, so far, in fact, 5 minutes before this, I just came in from going to one of our wildscapes, and they had like 15 volunteers who were all like, yes, we're going to do it. So trying to just get out there one at a time. In fact, they want me to come to one of their community events and present on Time to Restore. So David, I may be calling you.
I'm at your service, Tina. Let me know what you need.
Yeah. They were like, if you tell us which plants are most important to plant and which, you know, that kind of thing. I said, that would be great.
So. Last night we did a training also in North Texas on the other side, on the Dallas side of the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. And we had many excited people that are just as eager to work on the Plano-McKinney side as Tina is over on the Fort Worth side. Getting those allies on the ground locally makes a huge difference in terms of how you spread your limited staffing and outreach resources. You can't take all of this on, particularly in the face of what might be coming from federal funding and even more limited resources. You need help, and you need to maximize that return when you can find it. So thank you, Tina. That was great.
You're welcome.
Any last questions for David, or we'll open it up to any non-Master Naturalist related questions too, or comments that anyone has in the last couple of minutes? or any topics you'd like to see covered in future webinars?
I could just say something about where I'm doing my phenology volunteering as a master naturalist.
Excellent.
There's an organization here called Prescott Creeks. I'm in Prescott, Arizona, and this is in the Central Highlands. So I'm a Central Highlands master naturalist, and um, Prescott Creeks has gotten kind of a boost from there being more each year, more Master Naturalist volunteers getting involved. This riparian restoration project. And so I've been able to get the phenology trail back up and going. And I want to just kind of give you a sense from somebody who's on the board of Prescott Creeks who told me that the director has just been uplifted by the engagement of these master naturalists in he was kind of running the show, one man project for years. And so this, I mean, it's a mutual uplifting because the master naturalists feel like we're doing something useful.
Mm-hmm.
And the group that we're helping is uplifted and has a sense of more to come. So
that's amazing. The power of Master Naturalist. That's awesome.
So
Grace, you really get.
So I actually came to phenology through being a master naturalist.
Amazing.
Yeah, great. Grace, the beauty of that is you both feed off that mutual exchange of energy, right? And it's contagious, right? That's the beauty of it is it's contagious for potentially the funders of that organization and stakeholders that are believe that organization is going places. So it can really build a great engine for the future at all levels. Often you just need like was shared earlier, you just need a little bit of a spark to start thinking about things a little differently, and it can make a real difference.
That's been my experience so far. Now I'm in this kind of chaos of, oh, I've got people who are interested in joining me and doing this. What do I do now?
Yeah, it's a great problem to have, Grace. I'll be real honest with you. It's a great problem to have. Right now, I've got several groups that are so excited that trying to get them trained up, getting them calmed down enough to get trained up so that they know what they're doing has become, a bit of a full-time job on a daily basis, answering all those questions. But it's a great problem to have. So.
Yes, David stirred up a lot of engaged people. It's been wonderful. Almost overwhelming, but not quite. And I see in the chat that Rita and Steve posted about maybe a topic for a future webinar is the some environmental factors that influence phenology. I think we could definitely cover something like that. And we'll try to look to both the Southwest as well as more temperate areas, because I think often we kind of leave out the Southwest and the very different influences of things like precipitation here on phenology. So I'm going to note that for a potential future webinar. Thanks for that suggestion. Any last thoughts or webinar topics? Thanks so much, David, for joining us and sharing all of your experience. I think this is really valuable, and I hope we can have more conversations like this going forward with other people who are doing such great work and trying to engage volunteers.
I know it was a lot, and it was covered. I talked real fast, so if any of y'all need help, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be happy to provide some brainstorming on your particular situation and how you might be able to kind of turn the corner and get off of a high spot. Just reach out to me. I'd be happy to do that for you. And thanks, Erin, for having me.
Yeah, I'm going to stick David's email in the chat since you offered that. And we can share it with people too that maybe have left earlier. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you at Phenology Week. We'll also be talking a little bit about influences of environmental variables on phenology during that week, so be sure to join us then. Yeah, Rita, did you have something else? Oh, you're muted.
Yes, because we were wondering, is there some way we can see some of the chats after the meeting?
I could share Yeah, I could share the chat with you.
Okay.
Sure, yeah. Yeah,
Because there was a lot, we wanted to listen
I know,
and
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
what I'll do is I'll send a little summary email with some of the resources shared, and yeah, I
okay.
could do that for
Terrific.
sure. All right, well, thanks everybody. Have a
Thanks.
good
This
rest
was
of your
wonderful.
day.
Thank you, David.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet. Thank you.